So in my live stream this last week, I counted down the top 20 cities where my viewership originates from. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but it is very heavily weighted towards US cities. So today I'm going to take the absolute wrong lesson from that exercise and just basically ignore the US altogether. It's the 10 most urbanist World Cup stadiums of all time, and it's coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer suggested topics always welcome down in the comments. And nobody really asked for this, but the World Cup starts Sunday, and you know I love talking about stadiums, so what did you think was going to happen? For those of you who are new to this channel, maybe you're just an innocent bystander who put the words World Cup into the search box and had the misfortune of having the algorithm lead you to the enormous waste of time that is this channel. Well, first of all, I apologize, but also an explanation is in order. I've made a few videos about stadiums now, and I've triangulated on this idea of evaluating stadiums to see how quote-unquote urbanist they are. And I'm not going to go into detail about the criteria I use for that, but rest assured there's always a spreadsheet. My approach here is essentially the same as what I used for my video on North American soccer stadiums and my baseball video to a certain extent. It's really, 1, how well is the stadium integrated into the city's urban fabric? 2, how pedestrian friendly is it? 3, how bike friendly is it? 4, how well served is it by transit, particularly rail transit? 5, what's the footprint of the stadium parking? More is not better. And 6, what's the footprint of the stadium itself? A fuller explanation of all this can be found in those last 2 videos. What's going to make this a little bit different is this is going to be a big pool of international candidates. The World Cup is what it says it is. Since its inception in 1930, it's been held on 5 different continents in more countries than I want to list. So this was a bit of a research project. And also, I think the World Cup is a perfect example of why urbanism in stadiums is worth caring about. I mean, if your city is hosting World Cup matches, and a lot of different North American cities will be in 2026, would you rather the tens of thousands of people visiting your city all stay at hotels by the airport, rent cars, and drive to some far-flung suburban location and park in some ginormous parking lot? Or would you rather they stay downtown and enjoy your city and take transit or walk to the match? Some of you are obvious misanthropes, so you'll probably opt for door 1. But I think for most of us, scenario 2 is preferable. Although, maybe it depends if they're England supporters. Just a couple of caveats before I get into the list. 1, I didn't have the time or inclination to evaluate every stadium that's ever hosted a World Cup match. I just don't have the staff budget for that. Instead, I only looked at stadiums that hosted a final or a semifinal match. I mean, if your stadium was only good enough for group stage matches or quarterfinals, it's just not good enough for this channel. Sorry, I have standards. Also, I am going all the way back to 1930, but I'm reviewing the stadiums as they are today, not as they were back then. So if a stadium's been renovated, then I'm looking at the renovated version, and I'm looking at the surrounding land use, infrastructure, and transit service that exists today. Okay, that is all the setup I'm gonna do, so let's just get into it. Number 10 is Estadio Monumental in Buenos Aires, site of the 1978 final where the host country beat the Netherlands 3-1 in added extra time. The stadium is home to legendary Primera Division side River Plate, good neighborhood connections, pretty convenient to the Belgrano Norte rail line. So this is a good place to acknowledge that the World Cup has not always been played under the most savory political regimes. Mussolini in 1934, Putin 4 years ago, Qatar this year. Qatar? I'm going with Qatar. And Argentina in 1978 wasn't exactly a bastion of enlightened democracy. I won't get into it, but I will highly recommend the podcast World Corrupt if you're interested in learning more. Number 9 is St. Jacob Stadium in Basel, Switzerland. Or is it like Sonia Kobe? This whole thing's just gonna be an adventure in pronunciation. Whatever it's called, it's currently home ground of FC Basel in the Swiss Super League. And it hosted the 1954 semifinal where eventual champion West Germany rolled over Austria 6-1. I love a stadium that's got tracks running behind it with its own station. I love a stadium that's got infill development and cranes in the air. And it's Switzerland, so you know the tram game is gonna be strong. There's a lot to like here. Number 8, site of the 2014 World Cup final, the Maracana in Rio de Janeiro. Germany 1-0 over Argentina in added extra time. Also, site of the 1950 final where they jammed around 200,000 people in. Probably not the best idea. Subscriber Call Me Ronald wants me to use this as an official capacity for my stadium countdown. I don't know. Home of local clubs Flamengo and Fluminense. For this list, it doesn't have the best urban integration, but I do love a stadium that has its own rail station. You've got Metro Line 2 and multiple regional lines, decent bike access, and some active adjacent land uses. And this is about as good a national team stadium as there is. Number 7, I just used this one as my sub-count check last week. It's Camp Nou, home of FC Barcelona, and the 1982 semifinal where eventual champion Italy triumphed over Poland 2-0. I've only briefly touched on Camp Nou in a couple previous videos, so let's dive a little deeper. Accessible by 3 different metro lines from Kolblanc Station, and an additional metro line plus 3 tram lines from Palau Real Station. There's a bit of parking crater action at the stadium, but the streets leading from Kolblanc to Camp Nou are really active, and they can and do direct away fans to the less desirable metro station. Camp Nou is very well set up for a car-free visit. Number 6, let's return to the 1954 World Cup in Switzerland, but this time we're going to Bern, where West Germany prevailed over Hungary 3-2 in the final. The stadium in question is home of Bern's team in the Swiss Super League, which is called Young Boys, and the stadium is called the Wankdorf. Full disclosure, I needed 14 takes to say all of that with a straight face because I have the maturity of a 9-year-old. Anyway, this one is compact. If you drop into Street View, it's got a very chill urban scene out front with tons of bikes. It has a train station. And because this is Switzerland, lots of nearby tram service. This just kind of makes me want to visit Switzerland soon. Number 5 is Estadio do Pacaembu in Sao Paulo, home of, well, actually nobody these days, except for when one of the city's Serie A teams needs to relocate temporarily for whatever reason. I include Pacaembu because there wasn't actually a knockout round that year, but it did host final group matches along with the Maracana that year. It's kind of a cool Art Deco structure, fairly compact, built into the ravine of a pretty central neighborhood. It's not exactly right on top of a metro station, but you're about a half-mile walk from both Line 2 and Line 4. Number 4 is Parc des Princes in Paris's 16th arrondissement. The stadium is now home to French League titan Paris Saint-Germain, but the earlier iteration of Parc des Princes hosted a semifinal in the 1938 World Cup where Hungary defeated Sweden 5-1 before losing to Italy in the final. The stadium is partially built on a freeway lid where the Périphérique passes through the 16th. And it's just an efficient use of land for such a large stadium. The parking footprint is basically 0. And because practically everything in Paris is like 6 stories tall, the height of the stadium doesn't overwhelm the neighborhood. Also, get access to Line 9 and Line 10 on the Metro. Okay, I'm sure you're all guessing what's going to be in the top 3, and I think at least one of them is going to be a surprise. I've got some dishonorable mentions and other errata as well. But first, quick reminder to drop a like on the video and subscribe if you like the World Cup. If everyone who likes the World Cup hits the subscribe button, I should be at about 4 billion subscribers by next week. Connect on IG or Twitter, if Twitter still exists by the time you watch this. Give the Patreon a gander if you're interested in bonus conversation and content. Sub count check. Yeah, the channel did hit 100K last week. Thanks everybody. So I can now fill my most requested stadium, the Melbourne Cricket Ground. No, I'm not gonna pronounce it Melbourne, and I never will, so save your comments. Look, I don't know anything about cricket. I'm sure this is an important stadium. And I have to say, just the aerial flyover makes me want to visit Melbourne. Okay, you got me. A little more on the politics and the rampant corruption in how these tournaments are awarded. It just seems like countries that are actually good at soccer should host the tournament. Like Netherlands and Belgium joint hosting would make sense. Or Colombia hasn't had a turn yet. Or figure out how to put it in West Africa. You could have like Nigeria, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. Those countries are almost always represented in the Cup. They love the game, and they produce some really great players. I just point out that Lagos, Accra, and Abidjan are large cities spaced about 250 miles apart in a straight line. I'm not gonna finish that thought. You know where I'm going though. And before you say, you can't give it to those countries because of corruption, well, just remember, Russia and Qatar. Russia and Qatar. Dishonorable mention to the 2002 World Cup, jointly hosted by Japan and South Korea. The stadium setups are just not good, which is sort of surprising. This goes to an important question I have about urbanism. Is urbanism just about population density and having a dense network of frequent transit lines? Because if that's all it is, Japan wins, and South Korea is way up there too. It's gotta be more than that though. I mean, this is the site of the final, Nissan Stadium in Yokohama. It's just in this dead zone that's sort of adjacent to transit, but not really. And when you do get to the dense part near the transit station, you get stuff like this enormous elevated circular walkway. And this kind of thing is not pedestrian infrastructure, it's car infrastructure. And it's car infrastructure from the country that's probably responsible for manufacturing more cars per capita than any other. So get down in the comments and sell me on Japanese style urbanism because I'm kind of down on it right now. Here's a bit of a spoiler. I just don't rate Wembley. I love the density around it, but I hate how massive the footprint is and how poorly it interfaces with the surroundings. Feels like it's gotta be a real dead zone on non-match days, which is a lot of days since no club team plays here unless it's like the FA Cup final or something. Okay, let's get back to the list. Number 3 is the Ullevi in Gothenburg, Sweden. Bit of trivia for the US viewers. This was the site of the very first overseas exhibition between two NFL teams, the Vikings and the Bears in 1988. It was the site of a semifinal in the 1958 World Cup, with Sweden beating West Germany 3-1 before they went on to lose to Brazil in the final. So let's look at it. It's very central, and Gothenburg is a great city with a fantastic transportation system. You're walking distance to the central station, and you've got trams and a protected two-way cycle track right out front. Honestly, almost good enough to be number 1. But it isn't. For number 2, we're going to Seville, and this is Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan Stadium, home of Sevilla FC. Semi-final venue for the 1982 World Cup. France falls to West Germany on penalties after things were knotted up 3-3 following added extra time. I've talked about this one a few times on this channel, and I basically love everything about it. Compact footprint, the infill and the plaza around the stadium are really well done. Super walkable, vibrant neighborhood, protected bike lanes everywhere, metro station across the street. This one should be good enough to be number one. However, I gotta give that spot to Estadio Santiago Bernabeu in Madrid, home of Real Madrid and hosted the final of the 1982 Cup, where Italy defeated West Germany 3-1. This is about as compact as an 80,000 plus seat stadium can be. It's got almost no parking, it's super walkable, super vibrant area, and you really can't beat the transit service. The Bernabeu metro station is great, but still, within that half-mile radius, you've got Nuevos Ministerios, where you can catch 3 different metro lines and like 8 different Cercanías lines. I can't imagine you'd ever bother trying to drive here, and I think that's the goal. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks to all the folks who keep signing up for Patreon. It's honestly really helping me keep doing this instead of looking for a real job, so that's fun. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.